Minor disclaimer about this video, this was recorded on the beta, and it's entirely possible mechanics look, behave, or are tuned differently when they're released on live servers. Imperator Averzian is a one-phase encounter where you play tic-tac-toe and prevent the boss from placing 3 adds in a line. It also has a brief intermission where you move from lane to lane to avoid being trampled. The main mechanic of this fight is Shadow's Advance. This cast will summon 3 Abyssal Void Shapers indicated by these dark circles. Once summoned, they will begin a long cast called Void Rupture. If this cast completes, it will create Void Claim territory for the rest of the encounter, but more on that later. Each Void Shaper has the Umbral Barrier buff, which gives them a 99% damage reduction to all damage, except for one boss ability. To destroy these adds, the boss will cast a Group Soak centered on the current tank called Umbral Collapse. If this is placed on top of an Abyssal Void Shaper, it will also be destroyed, preventing Void Claim territory from spawning in that space for the time being. The trick here is the boss will cast this back to back, meaning you'll always have one add remaining that will finish its Void Rupture cast and create Void Claim territory. As for where these Abyssal Void Shapers spawn, the first spawns from raid testing were usually along the edges of the room, with subsequent spawns usually occurring near any existing Void Claim territory. You may have noticed by this point that the boss room is divided into a 3x3 grid, and this is where the tic-tac-toe element comes into place. Think of each Void Claim territory as the boss placing an X in that spot. If Averzian ever connects 3 adjacent Void Claim territories in a row, he will cast March of the Endless, resulting in a raid wipe. As I said earlier, the remaining Void Shaper will create Void Claim territory and become active in the fight. It's at this point that several other adds will spawn. These start with some small Void Maw adds, but throughout the fight when more portals open up, you'll start to see Shadowguard Stalwarts and Voidbound Annihilators as well. If any of these larger adds, which doesn't include Void Maws, are within 10 yards of the boss, both the adds and the boss will gain a massive damage done and damage taken reduction buff. Averzian will also get this buff if he's in within 10 yards of a Void Claim space. As for what these adds do, Void Maws apply a stacking shadow damage dot debuff to the tank, and when they get to 35% HP, they will have reduced movement speed and begin moving to the closest Void Claim territory to heal. Void Shapers, Stalwarts, and Annihilators have an interruptible cast called Pitch Bulwark. If this goes off, it'll give them and nearby allies a big absorb shield. You want to tank these adds away from the boss and have all DPS swap to them and AoE them down quickly. As for other tank stuff on this fight, Averzian's melees apply a stacking debuff that reduces your max health, and when the boss summons adds, the tank with the most amount of these debuffs becomes weakened for 10 seconds. This acts like an AoE taunt for the adds. The last mechanic of this phase is Oblivion's Wrath. This creates a circle of lines around Averzian that will shoot out from him. If you are hit by this, it will deal big damage and knock you back. After you deal with 2 sets of Void Shapers, Averzian will begin casting Voidfall. This will knock everyone away from him, and as the channel begins, this will summon circle swirlies on the ground to avoid, as well as summoning 2 lines of invulnerable adds that will begin marching through 2 columns of the room at a time. You want to move to the save column, cleaning up any remaining adds and keeping them away from the boss if possible. This will repeat until the Voidfall channel ends, and then you'll repeat the mechanics you faced earlier. That about sums up the fight on Heroic. On Mythic, there are a few changes. The most important change on Mythic is Abyssal Void Shapers will spawn with several stacks of the Cosmic Shell buff. This will prevent Umbral Collapse from destroying them. To remove this shield, Averzian will cast Void Marked, which will debuff your raid. In testing, it was 3 DPS, 3 healers. This is a dispellable magic debuff that, when dispelled on top of a Void Shaper, will remove a stack of Cosmic Shell. You'll need to dispel enough players to remove Cosmic Shell before Umbral Collapse is cast, as failing this mechanic and having 2 Void Shapers up at once will result in a raid wipe. Once you have dealt with the shields, you'll want to dispel the remaining debuffs, as they do a lot of dot damage. Averzian will also summon Abyssal Malice when Void Rupture goes off. These adds will cast Pitch Bulwark like the other adds, but will also apply a dispellable curse called Black Miasma, which does a lot of damage and reduces the target's haste by 70%. And that's Imperator Averzian on Heroic and Mythic difficulty. Moving on to the next fight, Vorasius. Vorasius can either be the second or third boss you encounter and is a straightforward, mostly single target fight. Shortly after engaging him, he will cast Primordial Roar. This will pull everyone towards him, and when the channel finishes, it'll do some damage and a knockback. You want to be careful to not fall off the cliff near him when he's giving you the big suck. Vorasius will follow this up with Crystalline Eruption. This will create a big soak circle that the tank needs to stand in. It will also apply the debuff Smashed, which increases physical damage taken by 150%. And finally, it will create a wall of Void Crystals. These will be important later. We have the same tank take both of these eruptions and make sure to use a personal on the second one, as it will deal huge damage with the added damage taken from Smashed. This is because the boss will cast Shadowclaw Slam throughout this phase, which is similar to Crystalline Eruption visually and mechanically, but it will not spawn a wall of Void Crystals or apply the Smash debuff. This leaves the tank who doesn't have the Smash debuff to easily soak these circles without having to worry about dying. Be careful though, because at the start of each phase, Vorasius will cast Crystalline Eruption again, but the initial tank will still have the Smash debuff requiring the off tank to take these. After casting either Crystalline Eruption or Shadowclaw Slam, an Aftershock will be created. This creates circular delayed explosions you'll need to move out of. At roughly 1 minute, 3 minutes, and 5 minutes into the fight, the boss will cast Parasite Expulsion. This will deal large amounts of raid damage, spawn circles you need to move out of, and spawn Blister Creep. Blister Creep are low health adds that come out staggered and will fixate on random players and always the off tank and begin moving towards them. The fixated players want to move towards the Void Crystal walls and kill the Blister Creep nearby the wall to destroy it. The assignment for this should be handled by a raid leader, as it is quite easy to see the fixated debuff on raid frames, and you'll need 2 Blister Creep to destroy each wall, and you don't want to risk having everyone go towards the same wall. In raid testing, these adds were also frequently dying to cleave before they reach the wall. You want to minimize this as much as possible, as this is the main way to wipe on this fight. These adds were also fully CCable, melee decently hard, and spam cast a sacking slow on the fixated target. How we dealt with them was having the fixated players go to their called side and stack so that the adds could be grouped up and killed quickly. Once any Blister Creep dies, it'll deal raid damage and spawn a circle underneath it you'll want to move out of. About 30 seconds after the parasites come out, Vorasius will cast Void Breath. During this, one of the boss's hands will glow with void energy to signal what side he will face initially. After the cast finishes, the boss will slowly sweep across the arena with a laser beam breath. If you haven't destroyed the Void Crystal walls at this point, you'll need to do it quickly or risk wiping. This Void Breath will pulse raid damage, and we simply move to the opposite side of where the boss was initially breathing and stacked up for healing. From here, you just rinse and repeat until the boss dies. But I would like to mention the Enrage quickly. At 6 minutes in, Vorasius will start a long cast called Focused Aggression. This acts like a single target Void Breath aimed at random players. If you make it to this point, you can extend the amount of time you have available by having your raid spread in a line horizontally to prevent it from cleaving, as well as using immunities. That sums up the fight on Heroic. On Mythic, there are a few changes. Blister Creep adds will now leave behind a growing puddle of dark goo. You'll want to have fixated players move to the far back sides of the room and kill their adds there to give you more space during the fight. Void Crystal walls will now require 3 adds to break the wall, up from 2 on Heroic. And that's Vorasius on Heroic and Mythic difficulty. Moving on to the next encounter, Fallen King Salhadaar. Fallen King Salhadaar also can be the second or third boss depending on the route you chose. This fight is very different from the last time you saw Salhadaar in Manaforge Omega. The main mechanic of this fight is Void Convergence. There are 3 circular portals at the edges of the room. When Salhadaar casts this, he will spawn 2 concentrated Void Orbs at 2 random portals that begin to slowly move towards him. If these orbs reach him, the boss will gain Void Infusion and wipe your raid. These orbs are not CCable, and you will need to have every DPS swap to them as soon as they are active, as well as having your tanks kite the boss away from them. When these orbs are killed, they will apply a raid-wide dot called Dark Radiation. You will want to stagger killing these to not get 2 stacks of this debuff, as it hurts a lot. Salhadaar will cast Fractured Projection, which will spawn several copies of himself that begin casting Shadow Fracture. These adds need to be interrupted or crowd controlled before their cast finishes, or they'll do raid damage and spawn a big void zone where they are standing. AoE crowd controls such as Ring of Peace can be really good for this, as it can deal with multiple projections at a time. The boss will target the current tank and 4 other players with Shattering Twilight. After the cast finishes, this will deal damage and knock the tank up in the air and summon void spikes that radiate out from the lines indicated by the graphic. A few seconds after the tank gets hit, the other players will be hit as well, with a lesser version that deals less damage, and the spikes that it spawns will be smaller. Salhadaar will debuff several players with Despotic Command. If you are affected by this, you'll notice a purple circle around your character. When the debuff expires, you'll drop a puddle on the ground. You'll want to stay away from your friends and then drop this off in a corner somewhere as it's about to expire. Lastly, when Salhadaar reaches full energy, he will cast Entropic Unraveling. This is a 20-second channel where beams will shoot out from him and slowly rotate while he pulses damage onto the raid. During this, he is stationary, so tanks will want to move him into a good spot so that people don't have to move through poop during this. This becomes a little harder because when this channel ends, Salhadaar will drop a big void puddle where he's standing, so you don't want to place this in the middle of the room. That about sums up the fight on Heroic. From here, you just keep killing balls while you manage your space and the boss dies. On Mythic, there are a few changes. Void Convergence orbs that are killed will spawn smaller, enduring void orbs the next time Void Convergence is cast. These smaller orbs have less HP than the big ones, but still are not CCable and will wipe you if they reach the boss. This just becomes yet another thing that the tanks have to be aware of when positioning and kiting the boss. Fractured projections are protected by Nexus Shield, which makes them immune to interrupts or crowd control effects. This will affect every projection except one at a time, forcing you to interrupt and crowd control them in a random order. This further emphasizes AoE stops, which is Ring of Peace, and allowing melee to kick nearby adds, or mobile range classes saving the interrupts for any far adds that spawn. And that's Fallen King Salhadaar on Heroic and Mythic difficulty. Moving on to the double dragon boss, Vaelgor and Ezzorak. Vaelgor and Ezzorak are the fourth bosses in the raid. This is primarily a two-target fight where both dragons are active at the same time and do not share health. In fact, if the health differential between them exceeds 10% of their HP, they gain a 100% damage buff. They also gain this damage buff if they are within 15 yards of each other. Starting off, one of the dragons will be flying and the other will be on the ground. The flying one can be hit by melee DPS, and the dragons will swap who is flying and who is on the ground after each intermission. Let's start with Vaelgor. Vaelgor's main mechanic is Null Beam. He will face the direction of the current tank and start channeling a beam that applies stacks of a dot. When the channel finishes, he will create a null zone. This will be tethered to all players and begin sucking them into it. You need to move away from the circle indicator to snap your tether, but doing so will deal damage to all players. The size of the circle is smaller based on how many stacks of Null Beam were applied to your tank. Vaelgor will place a 6-second debuff on a random player and mark them as the target for Dread Breath. This player needs to quickly move and point the upcoming Dread Breath away from the raid, as when the debuff reaches 0, the boss will have casted Dread Breath. This is a wide cone that will fear all players hit by it. The fear is dispellable, however, so you'll want to dispel the target once they bait it successfully. Whichever dragon is on the ground also does have a tail swipe, so make sure to stick to their sides. Moving on to Ezzorak. Ezzorak's main mechanic is Gloom. Ezzorak will target the current tank and begin casting Gloom. When this cast finishes, he will shoot a slow-moving orb forward that when it reaches a wall of the arena will deal raid damage and create a gloom field, which will damage and slow you if you stand in it. This orb needs to be soaked by at least 5 players, as the damage the orb does and the size of the gloom field it creates are diminished by doing so. Gloom fields will remain for the rest of the encounter, so you need to place them intelligently. Soaking Gloom will also apply a 1-minute debuff that increases damage taken when soaking Gloom, called Gloom Touched, that is applied after the dot expires. You'll need to have a rotating group of players to soak set up ahead of time. We just mainly have our range handle this, but you could also assign a few melee as well. Ezzorak will also cast Void Howl. This creates circles around every player, and after the cast goes off, it will deal damage in an AoE around them and spawn a Void Orb. These adds are CCable and will spam cast Void Bolt, which should be interrupted. You'll want to group up and cleave these down quickly. Vaelgor and Ezzorak's abilities will often be comboed with one another, such as a Null Beam happening at the same time as a Void Howl, creating chaotic moments in the fight. When the bosses reach 100 energy, they will cast Midnight Flames. As they are doing this, members of the Lightblinded Vanguard will create a radiant barrier in the middle of the room. You need to stand in this as it absorbs damage done by Midnight Flames so you don't die. You may have noticed during the encounter that Xal'atath has been showing up and applying a debuff to the raid. When you enter the radiant barrier, this dot will be consumed and will spawn a manifestation of Midnight. The manifestation will cast Shadow Mark on several players. Those players will want to spread out away from other players when the debuff expires, as it will deal AoE damage. And every 30 seconds that this ad is alive, it will gain a stack of Unbound Shadow, which increases its attack speed by 75% and reduces the amount that they can be slowed. From here, you just defeat the ad and repeat phase 1 as the space in the arena slowly gets smaller because of gloom, and then the bosses die. That sums up Heroic. On Mythic, there are a few changes. The first snap tether of Null Zone will trigger Null Scatter and spawn a bunch of swirlies you'll need to avoid. Gloom Touch will now apply in an AoE around the players who soak Gloom. Players who soak Gloom will need to spread out as their Gloom debuff is expiring. Xalotaph will cast Cosmosis during the intermission. This will cause an astral reflection of the dragons to spawn at the edge of the arena, which will cast one of their abilities. This happens in a sequence. In raid testing, it was Void Howl, then Null Beam, and finally Dread Breath. Dread Breath will still target a player who will have to face the ad away during this. And that's Vaelgor Ezzorak on Heroic and Mythic difficulty. Moving on to the last boss for the purpose of this guide, the Lightblinded Vanguard. The Lightblinded Vanguard is the penultimate boss and is a 3-target council fight. Each boss represents one of the Paladin specs, with Vanille Lightblood representing Retribution, Amias Bellamy representing Protection, and Sen representing Holy. To start off, this fight has a gimmick similar to Jaina from Battle of Dazara lore from BFA, where when you cast Bloodlust on this fight, each of the bosses will cast Divine Shield. This, however, can be mass dispelled by a priest. This will give the bosses forbearance and prevent them from using Divine Shield or Avenging Wrath again for 2.5 minutes. When you pull the boss, you'll notice that each of them has an energy bar that is at different levels. When each boss reaches max energy, they will cast an aura and then channel an ultimate spell for a time. You'll want to have your tank player either drag the appropriate boss when they are about to channel out, or just move away as a raid from the channeling boss and their aura. These will be triggered in the following order. Bellamy will cast Aura of Devotion, which reduces the damage taken by allies by 75%, and then channel Divine Toll for 25 seconds. This will shoot out large Holy Shield projectiles you'll need to dodge. Lightblood will cast Aura of Wrath, which increases allies within 40 yards holy damage done by 100%, and then channel Execution Sentence for 15 seconds. This will debuff your healers and create this hammer above their character. When the channel ends, it will deal huge split damage, increase damage you take from this effect by 500% for 5 seconds to prevent you from stacking these up, and then spawn 3 Divine Hammers that spiral outward from that location. We just had healers stack in a sort of diagonal line and had people soak with them, leaving some room to allow people to dodge hammers out of the soaks. And lastly, Sen will cast Aura of Peace, which will pacify any player that directly attacks a boss within 40 yards for 4 seconds. Sen will then channel Tyr's Wrath for 25 seconds. This will apply a huge healing absorb shield to the 3 closest players to her every 3 seconds. You'll want to have rotating groups of range players and healers set up to soak this, as the healing absorb can stack and was pretty massive in raid testing. In addition, when any of these bosses finish channeling their spell, it will create a massive consecration where the boss was standing for the rest of the encounter. As for other spells that will be cast throughout this encounter, Bellamy will cast Avenger's Shield, which will mark 4 players with a debuff and a circle around them. When the debuff expires, Bellamy will throw a shield that will deal damage and apply a dot that hits anyone in those circles. The players targeted just need to spread out, and the dot from Avenger's Shield needs to be dispelled after it goes off, as it hurts quite a bit. Sen will cast Sacred Shield, which gives her an absorb shield and makes her immune to interrupts. And then she will cast Elec Charge away from the group and begin a long cast called Blinding Light. This is interruptible and will deal huge damage and disorient the raid if it goes off. DPS need to swap to break her shield and then interrupt her. Lightblood will cast Divine Storm, which just deals AoE damage around him. Melee DPS should try to stay away from him when it's about to cast. There's a few tank swaps on this fight. It's important to note that Sen is a caster and isn't really tankable. A threat still does matter because she tries to stay in range of the highest threat target. Both Lightblood and Bellamy will cast Judgment on their current target. This will increase the damage of Templar's Verdict and Shield of the Righteous respectively by 200% for 5 seconds. When they cast this, you'll need to taunt swap to avoid taking a big chunk of damage from their follow-up spell. We also notice that in Heroic at least, you can just move the boss who's about to cast their aura and ultimate spell into an existing consecration to save on some space. That sums up the fight on Heroic. You'll just need to keep moving around the room dealing with each aura and accompanying spell while the room gets smaller and smaller. On Mythic, there are a few changes. The main difference on Mythic is that when one of the bosses casts their ultimate, another one of the bosses will send a spirit towards them which will cast their ultimate as well. For Bellamy, Sen will accompany her and you'll have to dodge the shields from Divine Toll while rotating people in to soak the healing absorbed from Tyr's Wrath. For Lightblood, Bellamy will accompany him and you'll have to dodge the shields from Divine Toll while dealing with the Execution Sentence Soak. And for Sen, you'll have to deal with Execution Sentence Soaks while rotating people in for Tyr's Wrath. These overlaps can cause very chaotic moments in this fight and was where we wiped the most during raid testing. The Consecration drop from the bosses after channeling now increases the damage you take by 100% and pacifies you if you stand in it, preventing you from having your tank try to overlap these pools to save on space. Bellamy's Avenger's Shield will now affect the entire raid. You need to spread out and hopefully have magic dispels on hand, as the dot from this combined with the other damage in this fight will kill you quickly. Lightblood's Divine Storm now spawns slow-moving tornadoes that will converge on where he cast it. And Sen's Searing Radiance, which is a raid damage channel, will now increase in damage by 10% every second while she's channeling it. And that about sums up the Lightblinded Vanguard on Heroic and Mythic difficulty. I hope these boss guides helped you and want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.